It's great to be here today. I've never done a personal development talk before like this. I talk a lot in my job. As was mentioned, I'm a UK-wide senior manager for Mental Health Foundation. And it's odd to be talking about myself in an environment where my professional work is very interesting. And I suppose in a way I'm almost taking on from what Ben was saying, because a lot of Ben's story resonates with me as well. And the thing I did was to really immerse myself in trying to make a difference in mental health. But whilst I will touch on that, that's not what I'm here to say today. I'm starting my timer so that I know where I'm at. So I started 7 and a bit years ago to take a photo every day. Friends of mine were involved in the startup of Blip Photo, which is an Edinburgh-based photo journaling site which allows you to take and post one photo a day with a bit of writing, whatever writing you want. And I'm going to talk a bit about what I've learned from my 2,767 successive days of photos. I'm going to reflect on some of the factors that have made this a real positive experience for me and some of the things I've learned. So one photo a day, 2,763 here, because I had to send the slides a week before the event, and nearly 700,000 views of my pictures. So what have I learned? Where have I been? What have I done? What have I thought? Well, one of the things I got massively from doing this is an ability to understand myself, a bit of mindfulness, and a bit about the moment. Now, mindfulness, everyone will give you a different definition of mindfulness. I know we'll have several today. But for me, I go for the very simple version, which is paying deliberate attention to what is happening as it's happening. And you might describe me a little bit as a moment stealer. I like to find moments of connection and to preserve those. So on May the 6th, 2014, I was on my way to a hospital appointment. I hadn't had a chance to go out for a walk at lunchtime. I had this camera, which is my little camera, around my neck, and I was on my walk, and I didn't have anything, and it's a bit anxiety-inducing to not have a picture late in the day. And then because I was looking at my surroundings, being part of that world and being quite mindful in the space, looking out for things, I saw this rabid panda coming out of a manhole cover. And I was reading Stephen King's It at the time as well. And quite often what I find, I'm going to go over this side of the stage, what I find is that something in the picture evokes something that I was doing. And then when I was looking through pictures to include in this presentation, the moment came right back to me. Similarly, January the 22nd, 2015, my health kick was still kicking. I was still walking every day, and I was down by the River Clyde. I'm a real sucker for reflections. The more total the reflection, the better, and symmetry. Something to do with my disordered desk and my very ordered picture. But this is a great example that saw me down on my knees in my suit trousers by the Clyde side with my camera dangling down on a self-timer to get the picture. And, I can be a bit obsessive about pictures sometimes, and I've learned that over the years. Part of doing this to start with was to communicate with others, and I've found that over time I have become less about what other people think of my pictures and more about what they mean to me and the people in my life, which I guess was a big thing and is a huge thing in relation to the way that people share pictures on social media more generally. Street photography is a challenging thing ethically for a number of people. I happen to see this image, and I quite like to use my daily journal to say something about issues that I care about, whether that's mental health, social justice, or other kinds of things. And one of the things I do, and you'll notice in some of these pictures, is in looking at the ordinary, try and see the thing that doesn't stick out, or that's out of the ordinary, the thing that's different. And this was too good not to use, even though it challenged me ethically about whether or not I should share a picture. And I should say, because I didn't say it at the beginning, that Blip Photo is completely public. So everything I post, words and pictures, is accessible to anyone who has the URL to find them. So everything I say there about myself and how I am, or what I take pictures of and who I take pictures of, is available to anyone who knows how to find it. And that being public was a big challenge for me, and that's partly why I took it up. I have found that hiding in plain view works for me. I'm sometimes a bit nervous, social anxiety-wise, oddly enough, given, whenever I do a Myers-Briggs, it's the E and the I, which is always confused because I behave like an E and think like an I. And what's great is when you have a camera on you all the time, you can hide behind it like this. And I can watch the world through a viewfinder, and people don't come up to me. And that can be a bit of a challenge in professional situations where invariably I get asked to bring a camera, and as soon as I strap on a professional-looking DSLR, everyone stops thinking about me in my professional role, starts thinking of me as just a photographer, which is very, very interesting. I'm just going to flash that one up there. I was on a day off at the zoo, and it was only when I got home that I realized that I'd actually shot a depression awareness campaign completely by accident whilst I was looking at the monkeys. I've been in both of these monkeys' shoes, or ropes, or whatever that is. And it's a real indication of how sometimes the image just evokes the wearer. So this is what you're all here for. How did I explore my identity and what that meant to me? I've always been out there. I've always been right out there. I developed a mental health problem, bipolar disorder, as a teenager. Went off to university where the walls came off, got some treatment, was very fortunate. I used my white male privilege to assert that. I had very supportive parents, many people don't. I had the opportunity to go to university, many people don't. And I got into student politics, into the student union movement, principally because I had this burning desire to make a difference on student mental health. And I did do that quite successfully in a number of ways, but I've always been out there, and I've always said that I never want to work somewhere that I can't be authentic and open about who I am. But I was able to share that through my blip, but I was also very much able to explore some of the other areas that were more challenging to me. I hate photos of myself, really hate photos of myself. It's partly why I always hold the camera. This is right at the beginning of blipping, where I felt the need to at least have some self-portraits on my timeline. It was before selfie culture became a big thing, before camera phones could really shoot backwards. And I was just a few weeks into a new relationship with the person who is now my partner. And this is me obviously hiding parts of my face behind my CPAP mask, because I have sleep apnea, and this is how I go to bed, somewhere a cross between Darth Vader and a fighter pilot. And I was at this point in my relationship where I had to bring my little blue bag of medical equipment with me in the car just in case, and people found that quite amusing. But here I was sharing it. There's a few with quotes, actually. I have been overweight since I was 10 years old. I was mercilessly bullied about it at school. It was horrific. And yeah, unlike many people, I haven't actually managed to summon the willpower to do anything about it. But from time to time, it gets me down. And conveniently, when I don't have a picture, I can sometimes just default to something like this. My shirt buttons pop all the time. It's why I wear jumpers. And I try to put these up to remind myself. It's a bit like smoking. I gave up smoking and sometimes have a cigarette just to see how awful it is. And it works. Doesn't work with this. But I have this set of images and this idea of being able to put myself and body image out there. And this one was the day that Robin Williams died. Now, Dead Poets Society is my favourite film. That's why I didn't shout it out earlier on. I was at a very authoritarian boys' school. See, there's a common thread amongst the speakers today. And I could quite easily have taken my own life as a teenager. I didn't. I now try and stand on as many desks as possible with as many captains as possible. And Robin Williams and Stephen Fry, as out and open men living with bipolar disorder, were quite an inspiration to me when I was a teenager looking for a sense of identity. And I put this out there with all of that data because 6,000 people a year die of suicide in the UK, and it's not mental health services' job to stop that. It's everyone's responsibility, and I like to share a bit of myself through my work and have that out and proud. there's a lot of sharing and documenting life. It's sort of like Instagram on steroids. And it can be, I said it can be quite obsessive. There have been some moments of obsession where my partner coined the 5-minute rule, which is that if she invokes the 5-minute rule, I'm not allowed to spend more than 5 minutes trying to take a perfect picture of a particular thing. It was coined at the Museum of Flight in East Lothian as I was lying on my belly under Concorde trying to take pictures of the wheels with motion blur around it 3 weeks into our relationship as she sat at the side texting people saying, I'm not sure this is the one. But here we are. And I stopped taking my big computer away on holiday because we went to Florida for 2 weeks, had an amazing time in Florida, but I took 2,000 photos a day and spent 3 hours every evening trying to pick the one which would be the one that everyone would love. So this is one of my very favourites because I used to work near the cathedral in Edinburgh, St Mary's Cathedral, and one of the things about doing a daily photo journal is that you get a sense of where you might find a picture. Blippers, as people who use blip photo are tenderly know ourselves, often have what we call a blip bank. You'll notice that the word blip comes before most common nouns and adjectives in relation to the behaviour on the site. And it always gives me a massive sense of satisfaction when I get to work on a work day at 9 o'clock and I've already got a really good picture. It kind of releases a bit of tension and anxiety. Well, these guys sitting in the cathedral close in front of one of the big doors, eating their bacon rolls. It's a moment that you would otherwise walk past, but that I saw and managed to capture. And I particularly like the big guy at the end because, you know, big guys have emotional connections and all that stuff. But the white overalls and the texture and all that kind of stuff as a picture really worked for me. This one I love as well. This is a camera phone. This is not taken with a big camera, principally because as a man you can't point a camera anywhere near children. It's unwise. Although on the upside, when I take pictures of my own children in the park, there are never any other children in the picture because their parents usually shush them away when they see I've got a big camera. But for the last 2 years, I've been what I sometimes describe as Schrodinger's manager, working between Edinburgh, Glasgow, and London, never really in any of them. And today I'm in Inverness, therefore I exist. But this is more London, right in the heart of corporate London. That's PricewaterhouseCoopers headquarters behind. And there's water features there, and there were children playing in the water features. And this moment of this, what I was talking about finding moments of incongruity in what you see. This young lad was literally basking in the sun, and it absolutely had to be captured. I love getting behind the scenes in life. I did first aid duty for a number of years, got some great shots of Murrayfield and the tattoo. But this is one that I had to have in my collection to show my children. This is me waiting inside for a private meeting with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, with a number of mental health charities to talk about children and young people's mental health. And oddly enough, I focused on the principle here. Normally what I do when there's celebrities around or a big thing is take pictures of the audience and people's reactions to them, because it's much more interesting to see what people think. I'm obviously going to take a picture of you at the end for my blip today, but that was very good to be able to get that close with a camera, although I put it away later. I've got a sneaky shot from later on. It's in Dundee of Prince William standing under a Nua Wally poster. But I figured that might be a bit disrespectful after a private meeting. And part of this is working out boundaries and working out what you can do and what you can say, sometimes what you can get away with. Just put Inverness in randomly. This is a great conference in Eden Court, but that day I had been to a really crap conference in Eden Court. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I walked out and this was this amazing light. I do some wedding photography. I don't do much wedding photography because of my documentary style. Not everybody likes it. I don't like posed pictures with Auntie Vi. But what's great is the ability to help family out. And this is my cousin, and that's a pearl in the middle of the bow there, which my grandfather brought back from Japan in 1966 for my grandmother. It's the last one that survives. And the ability to tell that story as all the kids in our generation get married, they now wear the pearl on their person. Two cousins both wore that. I guess the biggest thing that's happened to me over the past 7 years is the metamorphosis of me from a person wedded to a mission to achieve things in work through making a difference in mental health. It's taking on this role of father and parent in a way that sort of reflects the stuff that Ben was saying about people growing into the things that you expect. I'm even going to get a mortgage. In fact, I'm waiting for an email to say that the missives are completed on a house. That's another story entirely. But we had a long chat about how we documented the pregnancies and our children. And both my children appear on my blip quite regularly, but with code names. So they're code named by initial. And these are two pictures that I will, I don't own anything more important to me than these pictures, I don't think. And they're born of two very different sets of circumstances. In the first picture on the left is my first daughter at the age of about 30 seconds. And we'd had the discussion. My partner wasn't totally sure about herself in the delivery room. We had a birth plan that didn't involve cameras. But I took the camera, with permission. I took the camera, this camera. This lens has seen much. And about 15 seconds before my first daughter was born, my partner said, "Get the camera." So there I was like a ferret into my bag, and captured this picture. There are a couple that are earlier of this with this look of sheer shock on my partner's face. But my second daughter was different because we decided to make a photo essay of the whole labour. And there's no gory pictures of crowning or anything like that. But one of the things that my partner used to advance labour was looking at pictures of our first child as a baby on the iPad. And she had another induction, and there's lots and lots of pictures of the thing. But this is our second daughter aged about 5 seconds. That's literally just after she's been put on my partner's chest. Again, that's been very, very interesting to reflect back on a labour. And again, I will perfectly well own up to hiding in plain view and feeling useful with a camera in my hand when I can't do anything about a contraction. But there's nothing of the level of raw emotion that I have so far experienced in my life than that moment of connection at the point you become a parent. I could, if I wanted to do something with my life that wasn't making a difference in mental health, I would be a birth photographer, but I don't think you can really do that as a man. I could do it as a man, but I don't think I would get many clients. And obviously, parenthood did something for my body image. It definitely did, because I don't want to pass it on to my girls. But you wouldn't have seen a picture of my bare torso on the internet. Well, you might have if you'd look very carefully. But here we are doing a bit of skin to skin. And then, on the 22nd of December 2014, I walked out of my office. Well, I didn't walk out of my office. I was in the foyer of my office in George Square in Glasgow when the bin lorry came past the doors and crashed into the hotel 60 yards to the left. And we walked out of that door, saw the bin lorry, saw people running in, looked to the right, and saw this trail of devastation. And people often joked to me, if I saw something happen, would I go for the first aid or would I go for the camera? Which actually pissed me off a bit because, obviously, what would you do? I'm very glad to say that the camera stayed in my bag. In fact, the bag got chucked at my colleague, and in I went. It was horrific. Absolutely horrific. Did what I could, CPR, all sorts of things. And the next morning, my picture was on the front page of The Sun and the Daily Mail doing CPR. Nothing in the world looks like CPR. You can tell what it is a mile away. And I had this kind of weird thing about being the picture, being the subject. But it very much helped me afterwards, going back and revisiting to talk about this. And the picture I took is on the camera phone over my shoulder, walking away from George Square, having just phoned my partner, who had no idea what was happening, and just before my colleague checked me visually to see whether I had anything stuck to me before we went to where we go next. So it's something that evokes feelings for me, helps me interpret, and finding insight it has been part of my journey. This one got me into trouble at work, nearly got me disciplined because I talked a bit too openly about the change process that was happening and how stressed I felt. I didn't know I was going to take a picture of a long chain or what it meant to me at the time. Sometimes I just take pictures. and when I see the pictures, the meaning or something becomes clear. Similarly with this one, this is not a painting. It looks like a painting. It's a staircase in the Mackintosh building at the Glasgow School of Art, where I just had a really difficult meeting where I felt greatly ashamed through no fault of my own, I now recognize. But it's very dark and evokes a particular thing. And I also discovered that, with this actually, looking back, when I've had a very difficult or busy or intense period, the photo immediately afterwards is usually really serene. So I had been taking photos at a conference for 2 days, and then I found that 2 days later I had this wonderful seascape. And that gave me an insight about what I maybe need to do following intense periods. Marking time has always been a thing with a daily photo blog, and having done it for 7 years, this picture of the Mary of Guise barge was my first ever blip. And I went back to it every year on the anniversary for 4 years, looking at where I'd come and where I'd been to. And the ability to look at 2 pictures in my collection now and orient myself as to what I was doing, what was happening that day, and where I've been personally since has been massive in the journey. And that was brought home to me just last week, because in February I'd been at a parliamentary reception and I had taken this photo of Big Ben in New Palace Yard just as I was walking out of Westminster Hall. And then 6 weeks later, that was the very nexus of the terrorist incident that happened at Westminster. And I was in my office in London Bridge looking at these pictures coming up on Twitter of people taking pictures of things that were very similar to Glasgow in a way that really upset me because I didn't take any pictures and nobody in Glasgow took pictures. So all I could do was take a picture looking west towards Westminster, and there's 2 helicopters hovering above what was happening in this cloudscape. Blip has been this community of interest. These are 3 members of Blip. Well, the young one is the son or the daughter of a member, running into the sea when the site was small and there were only a few hundred members and most of us knew each other. But that sense of community persisted because in 2015, the site was placed at risk because of a business deal and a failure to grow as strongly as expected in the US market. And the community was given a one-time opportunity to come together in a crowdfunding campaign and buy out the site, which I think is the first time a social media platform has ever been bought by its community, for its community. And this was the day that the crowdfunding launched. And not everyone was happy with it, but we had to do it, and it's done. And Blip is now safe and secure, and we all had to confront the fact that we might lose all of our pictures and all of our words, and that taught us something about ourselves and what store we place in this kind of stuff. But it worked. So before I sit down, some tips, because lots of you might like to do a 365 project or a photo a day. Carry a camera everywhere and use it daily. The camera you have is the right camera. It doesn't matter if it's this big or just the camera on your phone. Process, select, and delete the images the same day or as close as you can so you don't have millions of images banking up on your computer or in your phone. Only post your best. Curation leads to concentration, and that's one of the differences between Blip Photo and Facebook, where people pump out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images onto social media that aren't curated. The concept of curating your images and picking one is very, very mindful, very, very helpful, and helps with the reflection. Set yourself challenges, style, subject, build up your subject bank, as I said. Cultivate your vision. Look for the moment. What does it mean to you? And do it for you. I fell into this big mistake of trying to please others, and I did please others. It was great, but it had a certain amount of cost to me. Do it for you. That's why I do it now. And pass it on. One of the other things that's great about Blip is that it has the Bill and Ted's motto of be consistently excellent to each other. And it's great to be able to just pass on a nice comment to people. There's no trolling. I've never seen a troll on Blip, which is quite interesting. You get trolling and nasty people on Facebook and other social media, but not on Blip. And make it real. Do photo books, make albums, give talks. I'm going to finish with this, which was my 7th anniversary year with my 2 daughters standing at the beach. You might be able to tell that I quite like seascapes. And I want to say that I'm not the finished article. I'm not some guru. I'm not particularly inspiring. I just happened to take a picture of what I was doing most days and strung that together in an interesting sentence. I do it for me, and as ever, I need to find my mojo. and a pile of time to think, which is probably why we're all here today. Thank you so much.